So, having received the prayer from Joseph, we shall kickstart. The rest I said I'll give coursework at the end of my lecture. Today, we've already covered up to, can I call it the shell? We did the shell, and now I want to kickstart from there and see how we maneuver. Those who are joining, please just join straight, and then you mute. You mute because sometimes it interferes. I have to go check and then mute you. And then I also want to request you that when you join, please, you just have to carry that discipline, especially when you find people on. So everybody is receiving the screen. Can I have the final yes, and then I mute you all?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay. We are beginning with the finishing section. Is that what you saw on your screen?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Then at the end of this lecture, I'll give these notes also. You'll find them in the group plus the coursework. Okay, good to go. I can now mute my friends and then we proceed. Okay. The other thing I must also remind you that the timber we used on the roof, we shall take the standard. The recommended standard is the 4.2 meters length. Whereas when you are dealing with the field, I said you'll get between 3 meters and 3.3. But because we believe that people have standardized, we shall definitely move by the standard 4.2 meters. So you remember where I talked about adding an extra over item on the length. Please, let's retain the 4.2. I realized I'd used the 4.2. And this is why in my notes, at the end of the notes, you'll discover this NB. Timber length is the standard 4.2 meter length for this example. So for example, where you found and wanted to put on the rafters, yes. For instance, the length where, let me consider, say this, the vary, if it is 4.5 and you divide by 4.2, it means the extra must be joined. That's why I get the extra over scuffed joint. So whichever timber is less than 4.2, we don't have to add an extra over joint. Okay, so today I continue with finishing. The finishing section is covered also in section S of the standard methods of measure, and major finishing classifications are walls, floors, and ceiling. The classifications will depend on which kind of material you are going to use. Sometimes the finishing may be in cement, sand screed, it may be in terrazzo, it may be in ceramic floor tiles, and so on and so forth. So these materials can further be grouped into the following 3 items. When you carry out finishing on a site, we call it in situ finishing. Then sometimes you have tiles, slab, block finishing, and then plain sheeting, e.g. plywood for ceiling, assuming you are going to put up a ceiling in softwood. The in situ finishing, of course, you are aware when you plaster or you render, all that is done under the category of in situ. And they should be stated either the finishing you are carrying out is external finishing work or it is internal. And we are going to look at both categories. What happens if the finishing is external and what happens if it is internal? Let me first look at the three categories I mentioned first about the in situ finishing. Now, if you are talking about finishing in situ, you are mentioning actually sand and cement screed. Here, we expect you to tell us the composition and the ratio of mixing you are using. For example, it may be 1:3, it may be 1:4, 1:5, 1:8, and I hope these mixes are now very common to you. Secondly, you must let us know the thickness, because it will help the builder understand. If it is 20, usually we use 20 to 60 millimeter thickness, and the common one is 40 millimeters, because our walls are funny. Although we normally quote 25 millimeters, but we end up putting about 40 millimeters. Then you must also let us know the number of coats. We normally lay this in one coat layer. Now, let me also be very clear. The way we do plastering here is not the recommended plastering. You know, somebody gets the mortar, he'll just spread, cast, and you hear them locally in the Uganda saying that after he has beaten the wall, they call it beating the wall in the site. But the standard way would be smearing, laying layers, very thin layers until you build that required thickness. Then you tell us the nature of surface treatment. Are you dealing with the wood floated one? Are you dealing with the steel floated one? If, for example, you expect to put tiles on a floor, most often we shall end with the wood floating. But if it is painting coming, then we shall go for steel troweled smooth. So quote that also. Then the other thing, you tell us the nature of the base, where you are laying the finishing. If it is concrete block work, background, please let us know. Then tell us the preparatory work so as to form the key. For example, did you first hack the wall? You tell us that, because for your information, there is labor involved in hacking the wall. Remember, originally it was worked on, then you've hired somebody to hack it. Then any other special curing on finishing. For example, there are some cases where you apply the finishing and then you incur steam curing. Please, if you go into that, this is not very common here, but it is common in other areas where you may have to apply steam curing so that the curing is fast. So include it in your description. Next, I'll go to the second class, that is the terrazzo finishing. Here we look at the composition and the mix ratio. You know, with terrazzo, you'll tell us the first coat, say, will always consist of cement and sand screed in the various mixes that you've employed according to specifications. And then the second coat will consist of cement marble chippings. They may be white or they may be any color. And this will be 1 to 2.5. Then talk about the thickness, the minimum thickness, which is usually 20 to 60 millimeters thick. And the minimum thickness we recommend is 16 millimeters. Then you will tell us the number of surface treatment. Here you will, of course, tell us about the polishing and the grinding of the surface. And then we shall also be required to understand the nature of the base you are talking about. Is it applied, is the terrazzo going straight, direct on, say, concrete block work, or is it going I mean, is it going on concrete? Is it going on block work or on brickwork? You let us know. And lastly, of course, if there is any special curing, like we said in the other case. Now, let me look at the floor and paving. This is in section 3. Now, horizontal flooring and paving, crossfalls and slopes not exceeding 15 degrees, all these are given in square meters. Mark, I said if they are not exceeding 15 degrees, okay? Then if it is a ceiling, any work to walls and ceiling should be given separately. And this one, you state it in square meters. Then you must also describe the battering to walls and to any sloping of the walls. Now, if the area of the ceiling is measured between wall surfaces, please give it in square meters. And then, of course, you shall add labor that will be involved to arises, which you understand, and also to beams. If the work is wall finishing, section 4 will consider that the measurement is taken from the floor up to the ceiling. Note that if the finishing is to the wall, we consider it from the floor up to the ceiling. And the work behind any wood skirting or the like should be dealt with accordingly. And here, we disregard any work of walls below ground. How do we address skirtings and picture rails? That one goes to section 8. Timber skirtings, which are commonly used, and picture rails, as well as cornices, fillets, and so forth. These are measured in linear meters. So we use meters instead, not square meters. Then after you state the linear meters, you state the size, and you describe the labor, including any supporting grounds. Okay, sorry about that. I've seen your concern, Mr. Okay, then I said that the skirtings, these ones are catered for in linear meters. Then how about dividing strips, which are very common, say when you are dealing with the terrazzo? These are given in linear meters, where you state the end, the angles, and intersections. Okay, so these are all very key. That drives me now to the 4th item, that is doors and windows. Now, some of this work I didn't cater for it because I described it earlier, but I'll throw some light for your work. How do you deal with doors? Door shutters, the measurement of doors is divided into either you are talking of internal doors or you are talking of external doors. Note that. And the dimensions of each of these two classes of doors is further broken down into the door itself, which we normally enumerate, and then we describe the composition, and then the adjustment is later made. I told you earlier that because when you are dealing with the walls, you assume that there is no opening. So when you come to the section for doors, then you must deduct that area you've calculated for each door. Why they do it this way is to avoid errors. So if you have, say, 5 doors or 20 doors, usually, say for internal doors, flush doors, same size, same make,